If you are a lead pastor and you've always wanted to know what exactly your staff wanted from you, well, this is the episode for you. I sit down with a couple of my friends and we talk about what we look for, what we really like in the pastors that we've served. And between the three of us, we've served a lot of lead pastors. And we have a great insight and a great conversation talking about what we are looking for in a lead pastor. And so I want to invite you into this conversation with us. So let's get started. So the big question is this: how do pastors like us who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. So glad you're here. So glad that you are a part. Our goal here at the Ministry Hackers is to help you live your dream life in ministry by having more time, having more money, enjoying your family, enjoying friends, enjoying traveling and hobbies, living the life that God has created for you in ministry. And so I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're tuning in with us. And today we're going to have a very special episode. As I sit down with a couple of my friends that I served on staff with, been friends with for years, and we have a great conversation. But before that, I want to share with you a new gift that I want to give you. If you have ever wanted to know, how do I create more time? How do I create more money in my already busy ministry life? What I want to give to you is this free guide, the Pastor's Guide to More Time and More Money. And all you have to do is go to brandonpartycooper.com/more time, more money, and you'll get your free guide right there. So go there, get your free guide. It's going to show you the steps that you need to take in order to create this lifestyle where you get to serve a ministry, pastor a growing ministry, but at the same time, have more time and more money to enjoy life, enjoy your family and friends, enjoy doing things that you love, enjoy chasing other dreams and other ideas that you've had that you kind of put on the back burner because you're just so busy. What this guide is going to do is going to show you step by step how you can create more time in your day, more time in your week, as well as create more money so you can pay off debt, so you can save for retirement, so that you can start living the life that you've always dreamed of living without having to give up ministry, without having to sacrifice everything that God has already done in your life. And so I want to invite you, go to brandonpartycooper.com/more time, more money, get your free guide, and get started today living that dream life that you've always dreamed of living. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm going to sit down with a couple of my friends, Pastor Frank Yazbak, who's a worship pastor, and then Pastor Matt Wazbinski, who's been here on the show several times. And we're going to have this conversation about what we like, the things that we've really enjoyed, the things that we've appreciated over our years of ministry, serving the various lead pastors that we have served. And so I want you to tune in. I want you to take a few moments, listen to our conversation. And my prayer is that as a lead pastor, that you are able to take away some things that maybe you're hitting right on the head and you can keep doing them and doubling down, or things that maybe you're missing that you can adjust and tweak and really serve your team well. And if you're a staff pastor and maybe you're looking to transition, maybe you're in the middle of transition, or maybe this is just something you want to file away for when you are in transition, these are things that you want to look for in a lead pastor as you're interviewing and as you're having conversations and as you're interviewing them. These are the things you want to look for. And so tune into the conversation with us, enjoy this episode, and I pray that it adds a ton of value for you as the three of us just sit down, enjoy each other, and enjoy the conversation. All right, so excited today to be here. So we have Pastor Matt with us. He's been with us a couple episodes in the last few weeks. Decided to bring him back one more time just to hang out with us. And we have all the way from Iowa, Pastor Frank Yazbak. And so welcome, Frank. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So this is a pretty big commitment for just a lowly podcast. We come all the way to Virginia Beach. And so
16 hours, man.
Yeah. So we've been spending time going to taking all the kids to the farm, and today went to the farm, been to the beach, we've done went to the skate park today. And so we've been having a great time hanging out. Matt, man, we wish you were here.
I know. I'm like, the FOMO is intense right now. I mean, you get to hang out with my favorite worship pastor. I mean, don't tell any of the other worship pastors that I work with that, because I tell them the same thing. But Yeah, like it just reminds me of a lot of really good like staff meetings and just hanging out and just good times. So it was really cool to have this like really good friendship on staff way back many moons ago, it seems like, but it's
Yeah.
cool to see it's all kind of in the same grouping together again. So very cool.
Yeah, so to give everybody a little history, so the three of us have been on staff at multiple churches, different, areas of the country, but for one brief period of time, we had the chance to be on staff all together. And so Frank and I, we were on staff, what did we say, 4 years?
4 years.
4
together.
years. Frank was the worship pastor, I was the executive pastor, and then in the midst of that, Matt came on as the youth pastor for a couple years, and so we had a pretty good couple year run there with the three of us, and obviously the rest of the staff that was with us. And so, yeah, we had great staff retreat and great staff meetings, and man, so many good things. And that was what, 3 years ago or 2 years ago now?
3.
Yeah, probably about
3 years ago.
3. Mm-hmm.
Okay, very cool, man. It's crazy how time flies.
Yeah.
But because we shared that time, and because we've been on staff at multiple locations, Matt, how many churches have you been on staff at now?
Oof. 1, 2, 5. 5, I think. So.
And then Frank, how many did you say you were?
6. I'm at 6.
6,
now.
and I think I'm
Dang
at
it,
4.
Frank! Come on. Just got to one up.
Anything you said, I would have said one number higher.
Plus one, whatever Matt said.
Yeah, so I'm at 4. So you guys are both beating me out, and I've been in ministry longer. So man, I got to step up my game. And so
What you got to do is just you got to agitate more people. Is what you got to do?
Well,
you have to have
I
that
think
shorter
I'm
shuffle.
way more agitating than you two are, for sure.
That's probably true.
Easy. So we've all worked for multiple lead pastors. And what we want to talk about today, and what we want to help you out as a pastor and ministry leader, is help you understand what you're looking for in a lead pastor. Because lead pastor comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, all kinds of temperaments, all kinds of leadership styles, all kinds of vision styles. And so there are some pastoral lead pastors that work better for us as individuals, but then there are some lead pastors who just work better in general for everybody. And so what we thought it would be fun to do is just sit down and have a conversation about what do the three of us who have worked on staff together, we've been in multiple locations together, or multiple locations separate, what is it that we feel like is really good to look for in a lead pastor? So whether you're interviewing or maybe you're in a position and you're maybe you're frustrated, or maybe you love your lead pastor, you're not really sure what it is that makes you love him or like to work for him, or maybe you're frustrated at where you are and you're saying, man, what is the disconnect here? What is not working? For us, we want to take some time and just say, here are some things that we've found over the years in our collective, however many years of ministry, that this is what really makes a good lead pastor work for us, and we think work for you as well as a pastor and ministry leader. So let me just kind of start and just throw it out there. Like for the two of you, for you, Matt and Frank, what do you guys feel like is, when you think of all the lead pastors you've had, and think of the one lead pastor you really loved, you loved working for them, you loved, being around them, being on staff, what was the one thing that you say, man, this is why I like working for this guy?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that jumps out to me is humility, but that humility taking form of welcoming accountability and being present in accountability. So those two go back and forth. The first thing is, I love, while I don't love conflict, I don't love being accountable. Actually, my personality type is a rule breaker, so I don't love those moments. You had to have those moments with me before. I don't love those moments, but I do like knowing that I'm doing what I need to do. Mm-hmm. And so having consistent check-in, just being able to be accountable, knowing that I'm headed in the right direction, that's super important, but also knowing that the person that's over me, the person that I'm reporting to, the person I'm placing my whole family under and leading me, is inviting accountability into their life.
That's good.
So for us, in the Assemblies of God, like we're looking at a district, like a lot of times that's the district officials that are being over that lead pastor, and they're placing themselves in accountability. But the most valuable leads, the people that I trust to lead my family, are the ones that are inviting additional accountability and seeking out people, not just to hold them accountable, but to mentor them and help them grow.
Yeah, that's good. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, and kind of echoing on that a little bit. One of the things I love how you said additional accountability because one, being outside of the AG bubble now, that was one of my big concerns going into a non-denom church. Is because, denominations or cooperative fellowships, if you will, have pros and cons. And one of the pros is definitely there's a built-in structure. But one of the downsides with those too is a lot of times those structures come into play once stuff has kind of hit the fan, or once there needs to be correction. And I've found that great leaders will seek out that, and so it's easier to do those 1 to 2 degree shifts versus like a total 180 in the other direction. And so, yeah, for sure, people who are seeking out accountability, that was one of the big things at the church that I'm at now. During the interview process, I asked that, like, okay, heaven forbid, like this goes off the rails and like there needs to be some sort of correction. How does that happen? Who does that happen with? Or is this just sort of, this is the guy, this is God's man, and we're just following them, wherever they go. And so I think accountability is super key because, like Frank said, I think that as leaders, that's something we should echo in that consistent accountability. One of the things I really like is where I'm currently at 242 is we have monthly meetings with our direct reports where we go over, we call them RPMs. So how are you doing relationally, physically, mentally, spiritually? We go over goals that are kind of put out in front of us and that we kind of agree on together. And what I like about it is I've been in situations where meeting with my lead was stressful because normally when I met with my lead, it was because something had gone wrong and we needed to fix it. Exactly. And so it's like, hey, like you get the call from, the front office and they're like, hey, so-and-so wants to see you in their office. You're like, I did something, I broke something, a student broke something, what's going to happen? Versus when you have those built-in things, one, if you have an issue with them, it gives a built-in time where you say, okay, it's just going to be the two of us and we can work this out. And then it also gives them the opportunity to have like check-ins. So then it's like, oh, you've been missing the mark for 7 months. And now that there's a fallout, that's when it's coming up versus, hey, how is this going? How is this going? Checking in on this. And so, yeah, I really like that accountability. And then on the flip side of that, kind of one of my main ones that I really like is the releasing of ministry to the staff that you have hired. Because I've had some lead pastors where I guess the term would be micromanaging, that they, it's okay to have checks and balances to make sure that it kind of fits. But one of the stories that I always share about when I was interviewing at 242, I wasn't on staff yet. And the lead pastor at the time, we had all staff. So it was all 7 of our campuses coming together. And so it was like, 100 staff members were all together. And I always mentioned I saw the lead pastor 3 times. I saw him once in his office while I was walking down the hallway. He was just working on something by himself. I saw him once when we were in all staff, and he had other people, whether it was campus pastors or different pastors, lead the whole meeting, do announcements, do the teaching, do all that sort of stuff. And he hung out in the back and just had conversation with people. And the third time, we have a community center, and he was playing at the indoor soccer field with his kids. And then I said, so on this big once a month, get everyone together, like he wasn't the guy that was in front, because he's like, I've hired a team of people that I know are good at what they do, and I trust them to do what I've hired them to do. And so, like I said, as a lead pastor, you don't want to be like completely in the dark about everything, but I do believe it empowers your staff and makes your staff feel really capable. If they feel like, okay, you interviewed me, you've seen that I can like produce results, and you trust me enough to say, okay, yeah, keep me, like, let me know when this is happening, but like I'm not going to say I don't like the color of the font that you picked for that flyer that you're going to hand out. Like, you know what I mean? They trust you with, okay, this is kind of, you know, Frank, you're not going to have a pastor saying, oh, I think that should be in a different key. It's like, well, you know, this is kind of my realm. Or for student ministry when I was in it, it's like, well, I think that you should structure like games and then this. Like, they trust you that, hey, you've studied this, you are in, you know, conversation with other people in that ministry field, you're talking this out, you're praying about it, and they are releasing you to kind of do what you've been hired to do. So that's definitely a big one for me.
Yep. Yeah, that's good.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, even in the I want you to do a song in another key. Because where I'm at currently, I'm working for a former worship pastor, which is something I said I would never do. I would never do that. And coming to this place, I thought for sure, man, it was going to be different than it is. But these two things that we just talked about have worked together. So that releasing, knowing that I'm probably going to do things a little bit different, that has taken place. But on the other hand, that the consistent meeting, the accountability, the touch points, the bumpers on either side, you know, just letting us know that we're headed in the right direction, that's taken place as well. And when those two things work together, you get much more consistent forward motion, and a whole lot less speed bumps.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's very good. Well,
yeah, and the constant. Go ahead.
No,
I was just gonna say the goal, like the constant momentum forward. I think that's good. I had someone pose a question to me that's on our larger staff, but posed it to our campus staff, and said one great question to ask, whether it's your lead or your direct report or whoever it is. What is the one thing that is going to get me fired if I don't do it in a year? And I thought that was interesting because I've found myself in that position a lot where, Frank, you might say, hey, like as a worship pastor, they want us to have a big team, or they want us to like maybe a large team and the quality be a little bit lower, but we're involving a lot of people. While they might be expecting, we want a small elite team and it to be an A+ every single time, even if that means you have to say no to some people who are still kind of learning and growing. And so if you're not on that same page with what your lead wants, you might think that you're knocking it out of the park and, you know, hey, our numbers are way up. And they're like, yeah, but how many deep discipleship relationships do you have with people? You know, and so I think that even posing that simple question with your lead, and like you were even saying, Frank, like having those clear kind of like guardrails of like, okay, I'm not going to micromanage everything, but this is the direction overall I think you should be going. Whether you take a car, a train, a plane to get there, that's up to you, and I trust you with that. But this is kind of the direction I see this ministry as I'm overseeing the church as a whole.
Yeah, well, I would jump off all of that because I think the one thing that I really like when I think back to lead pastors who I really enjoyed working with, I think one of the biggest things, and it's kind of what you have both alluded to and talked about, is I like clear communication with me. I like to know what my boundaries are, but I also like to know that if I am outside of those boundaries, or if I'm, you know, kind of going rogue a little bit, like that you as my lead pastor can sit me down and have a conversation. Like, you're not afraid to have that conflict conversation. You're not afraid to challenge me a little bit. Like, I need to know that because my personality is more like, I'm going to go, and if nobody's going to challenge me, I'm just going to keep going. And I need a lead pastor who can challenge me and even call me on the carpet if I need it, but isn't afraid to have that conversation and isn't afraid to sit down and have whether it's just a one-on-one, hey, this is where we need to make change, or hey, you need to stop doing this. Like, because I just think a lot of lead pastors are afraid to have that conflict. They're afraid to communicate when they're frustrated, or they're afraid. You know, I have one situation that I'm monitoring in another church in the country that the lead pastor is essentially, he's squeezing out a staff member by passive aggressively taking away responsibilities, and he won't sit down and just have the conversation of, I think it's time for you to go, and here's when it needs to happen. Instead, he's just slowly taking pieces of his responsibilities away, hoping that the staff pastor will just eventually resign. And I can't imagine like being in a situation where the lead pastor isn't able to just have that conversation with me and say, either this is what we need to fix in order to move forward, or this is just a good time for you to find a new place to be successful. So
I think some of that is just knowing your people too.
yeah.
Because I know you well enough to know, first of all, you can be intimidating in conversation. Like you generally have thought things through well, and you have clear, direct paths that you walk down in conversation. But at the same time, in staff meetings that all three of us have sat in, you will change your mind if being challenged means that you're seeing a better way to do that. And so I know that about you, that you thrive on just, even if what you're thinking is not the best way, that challenge, that one just insert is enough to get you thinking in a different pattern.
Yeah, just show me.
And so just knowing your people, like that's super important too.
Yeah.
Is spending the time, and maybe, Matt, you're at a church where you have 100 staff members. Maybe the lead pastor isn't that person, but all of us have direct reports.
Yeah.
All of us have people and they have to know us. That's something super valuable at the church I'm on staff at, is we're pretty consistently not just doing things like Enneagram tests or strengths finders. We're always finding new ways to evaluate who we are.
That's good.
For me, my brain can't hold all that. But because we're doing it constantly, I'm constantly finding out new things about myself, but also about the people I work with.
Yeah.
So just consistent. It doesn't happen over a weekend in an interview. It doesn't happen over the first year. You have to keep learning about your team members. You have to keep learning them so that you can know them and respond accordingly.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I just think, we talk a lot in the Dream Life framework. We talk about building, developing effective teams. And one of those pieces is, just like you said, using the Strengths Finder test, using other personality tests, not because these tests are an end-all be-all, but because they give insight that, maybe I might learn something about you, Frank, over the course of 5 years working together that a personality test might tell me in 20 minutes. So then the learning curve is just taken out, and now I understand you on a deeper level. I can work with you a lot more effectively. Or if I'm your lead, then I understand how to motivate you more effectively, how to, have difficult conversations with you better. And I just think that we just, as lead pastors, that time needs to be put in to understand, kind of like you're saying, understand each individual. You're not leading a cattle crew. You're leading individuals who have very specific strengths and weaknesses and fears and doubts and all those things. And the more, as a lead pastor, that can be addressed on an individual basis, the more successful everybody else is individually, but then as a team, we're all more successful because of that.
Well, and it makes a difference to have a lead who wants to know you, but at the same time, who also wants to be known.
Yes.
There's this whole thing with, some guys that believe that it's better, whether they've been hurt in the past, they've had conflict, or they invited somebody in and it burned them, where they feel like they have to have a mystique, mysteriousness around themselves, around their family, around the struggles that they're going through. And when that happens and you don't know them, they're continually guarding themselves to where you can't know them. You're never gonna win. You're never gonna advance in that relationship. And so, while it's important for them to know you, they also have to have that same humility to say, I want you to know me.
Yeah.
And that includes the weak spots. That includes what I struggle with.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it almost makes it impossible for me to be completely vulnerable with you if I know that, you're guarded. And if I don't know, not that you want your lead pastor to tell you about every fight they're having with their spouse,
right?
But to know that they do have arguments with their spouse, makes you more okay, this person is trusting me with that information. And then I feel more, hey, I really need to go, hey, I just need a day off because I've just been going, and I haven't been spending as much time with my wife and my kids as I need to. And knowing like they understand that on the relational terms makes it a lot easier for you to come out and say that versus like, like I said, 6 months from now when like everyone's all burnt out and everyone's all angry at each other. And then that's when you're having the conversation versus like these little check-ins, because there being no level of open and vulnerable and humble enough to say, I don't have it all together, or I dropped the ball on this. It makes you feel like I have the ability to say that as well. Because if, I've had both sides of the coin where the leader is, like perceived as relatively flawless, and just by the nature of being human, we know that's not true. Right. But it makes it a lot harder because then you feel like there's this constant scoreboard in your head where I know I'm constantly dropping the ball or making mistakes or falling short of what was expected, and they're not. Versus even if it's like, okay, every so often there's a conversation, hey, we planned this event, I know I was really championing it, I thought this was going to go really well, and 2 people showed up. Man, we really should have thought that, we'll try to do better the next time. And they kind of like take a little bit of that responsibility. I think that makes it feel a lot more easier for you to kind of be vulnerable and have a good back and forth with your lead.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I think that authenticity it's almost an art in itself. All of us are leaders. We all have people that follow us. And I think that finding that balance of being authentic with who we are and sharing vulnerable parts of us, but then also kind of keeping a little bit of like privacy or personalization to my own life, not letting, kind of like you said, Matt, like I'm not going to just open the floodgates and lay it all out for my staff to then have to deal with, But at the same time, like I think for me, when I have a lead pastor who is authentic with me and like you said, shares their struggles, well, then it makes me feel like I don't have to be perfect either. Like I don't have to like live up to this unreachable standard. I can actually be honest and even authentic and hold myself accountable and be accountable because they're doing that. They're being authentic with their struggles and their frustrations and their mistakes and all that. So I feel like, oh, well, then I can be that way too. Like I dropped the ball. I don't feel like I have to hide that because he didn't hide that. And so I can say, okay, I dropped the ball here. Help me fix this. How do we move forward rather than sweep it under the rug and pretend nobody else sees it? And hopefully we can just move on and not talk about it. So I just think that authenticity is an art form and a little bit of a, something that has to be developed over time. But I think it's well worth the time for leaders to have that developed in them so that it kind of gives that release for the staff pastors to feel okay with their own mistakes. Okay, so anything else? Other thoughts or other things you like about a lead pastor you'd like to see in a lead pastor?
Yeah, I love when I'm invited into the family of community. That's made a difference for me. Just I was at a church that my wife grew up in for 8 years. That's a long time. And we had built-in community. But since then, we've been at 3 different churches. And we've had varying experiences of people inviting us in to the community that's taken place. Specifically the leader. There are guys who think we're going to hire somebody and they're going to come in, they're going to do their job, or they're not. But everything about me being connected to that community affects my job performance.
Right. Yeah.
I gave up family. I sold my house. I bought another house. I'm gambling. I'm rolling the dice here. You're planted most of the time. The leader is planted. They know they want to be there, or they're going to be there, or they know they're going to be there until this happens. And they have a plan. And so for me as a staff pastor, to instantly know that I'm welcome into that leader's community, that I'm going to be a priority for them, not in like we're going to spend every waking moment together, but I know that my family has a place with you. They have a level of priority that not everyone has. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's good. Do you, because both of you, I'm sure, the lead pastors that you've served under have been various ages, correct? Is that a safe assumption?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like there is a denominator that makes that easier for them or harder for them, maybe? Like if they're a lot older than you or a lot younger than you, does that make it more difficult, or is it really just the individual that lead?
Honestly, I would say more so than age, it has to do with time, even family wise in ministry. So like, if their parents were pastors and their great 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 grandfather was a pastor, and they've kind of been in ministry life for a long time, I think it makes it harder. Just because culturally, as the Big C church, kind of like Frank was saying, like we kind of have that mentality of you have to have this mysteriousness about you, almost like, you know, you're the pastor, you're kind of separate from the rest of the group. And so I think that's something that's a little bit directly or indirectly taught. So I don't think it necessarily has to do with age, but I do think that the longer you've either been in ministry or been around like the backstage side of ministry, I think that, you know, just because over time, naturally, you're going to see hurt, you're going to see people get burned, you're going to see all that sort of stuff. And so I think eventually you get callous to that and then say like, okay, I saw my dad have really good relationships with someone, he was a pastor, and now I'm not going to do that. Or I saw, you know, growing up in the church, I saw this or that, or I've been in ministry for decades, and so over time I've been burnt, and so I'm going to separate myself from, you know, either my staff or my congregants. Versus like, I don't know if it's like a level of ignorance or what, but I think it's beneficial to be in that relationship and not let the risk of being burnt or hurt completely remove you from really good, healthy relationships. So I don't know if it's an age thing, but I do think there is some level of like time in ministry that affects that.
Gotcha.
I think there's a factor of what you're saying is true. I also think I know really embedded leaders who've been in ministry a long time, or in even our legacy generational ministers that have this down. And it's only because they've been consistently intentional to build that kind of culture around them.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably a two-headed spear or whatever. The first thing is you just have to know that what you're doing in the moment has echoes.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
you have
good.
to remember that how you're leading, how you're pastoring, how you're fathering, how you're being a friend, all of those things are going to have echoes, and that the closer you are to the person in proximity, the more impactful that's going to be. And so when you have that perspective and you see the people that are directly around you, your staff, your leaders, your board members even,
Right.
you know that your impact on them is going to have a deeper echo in their life than, say, you know, Sister Jane, who attends twice a month. So I think those leaders that I've seen do that, be successful, even while having years and years of ministry experience, they do that because they've developed that understanding that it makes a difference. We have a leader in our church right now who's super close to our family, and they take a lot of time to be intentional with my kids because of what you just said, because they have experience in ministry and seeing the damage that was done in ministers' families and in pastors' kids. And so all 6 of my kids receive special attention from that person. And he says pretty consistently, we want this to be the absolute place that they want to be. Our church building, physical location, not just the church in the general sense. We want this building to be the place where they always want to be.
Yeah, that's good.
And it is. My kids would rather be there than anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good clarifying statement too, is like a lot of it just depends on how healthy was the kind of like discipleship they were getting, because I can think of, like you said, like legacy pastors where like it's always been kind of like what their family has done or what they've been around for their whole life. One, if they have the self-awareness to even say, if they see them doing it wrong, to say, I realize like maybe the hurt or the pain that this caused me, so I want to make sure I do the opposite and I don't do that. Or, hey, I saw how well my father, my mother led and was intentional and all that sort of stuff, and I want to continue that tradition on. And so, yeah, so I think that it does really boil down to their I guess, emotional and leadership maturity of saying, hey, I need to make sure that I'm not just leaning on this a little bit, but that I am intentionally going, like you were even saying, going out of my way to make sure that this works well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole this is the way my father or my mother did it, and so darn it, this is the way I'm going to do it. That's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
That's a real slippery slope to get on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of that is just because we're in different times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just a massively different time. And then a lot of it is...
Oh, I was just going to say, like, kind of, like, real quick pivot off of that. Working with people who had done your job before. That can be something you don't want in a lead. Like, 'cause especially, like, student ministry. Like, I've had pastors that were, like, student ministers in, like, the late 80s, early 90s. And they're like, why don't you just get a bunch of pizza and play some music and like 500 people will show up. And like, they like, know what I mean? And so, yeah, so I think that's really good is like, yeah, if you're hearing that phrase too much as almost like a justification of why it will work, regardless of the evidence that it might not work, then it's sort of like, okay, maybe a little bit of a red flag going up a little bit. So,
Yeah, that's good. Well, and ministries change too. Like I think that's part of it, and that's the point that you're making, Matt, is that ministries change a lot. But even to what you were saying, ministries change a lot as far as like when I was growing up, like I lived in a town where I knew everybody in town and everybody knew me, and I'd ride my bike and it was no big deal. But now, like that's not really the way we. I mean, I barely let my kids leave the yard, let alone go to the grocery store. And so I think the church and particularly our staff becomes that small village that we're in ministry, and so we're always doing stuff at the church, we're always with our other staff members and the other kids. And I just think that the importance of that, like how a lead pastor really interacts with our kids especially, and with us and our family unit, and is aware of are we taking time off, and are we taking care of ourselves. All those things come into play, because I think that even though, the world is kind of like more connected, it's almost like our small community of people that we're on staff with becomes kind of our lifeline for everything, and way more important how, I know I'm a lot more aware now that I have kids that are kind of getting into, they're in elementary age. I'm very aware of how pastors interact with my kids, because I want them to have a positive perspective of pastors, but then also I want them to feel like this is a safe place that I can go to, because the rest of the world isn't always that way. And so yeah.
Yeah, and I think some people would argue, well, shouldn't you give the other staff members their space and like let them have their own private lives, and shouldn't you have friends outside of ministry? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the answer is always, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to live life together. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to do that. And I think Amber and I have found it remarkable, the people that we've had to convince over the years to say, hey, like, we want you in our home.
Yeah.
Like, I want you in my house, eating dinner at my table. Mm-hmm. Like, I work with you. I'm doing ministry with you. This is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard, and it can drain the life out of you a lot faster than you think. And I would rather do it with you, side by side with you, and be able to talk across a dinner table than to go and live my private life and then just see you at the office.
It's just work.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I would 100% echo that, because, man, I think I look over my years of ministry and I look at the teams that I've been able to be a part of and be on, and guys like you guys that I got to spend time with. Like, I feel that the team that you're on and the team that you work with is one of the highlights of ministry. Like, I love being on a great team, and I love spending time with the staff members I get to work with, and I love being with their kids and their families and watching our families grow together. Like, that is so fun. And so, yes, this idea of like we're siloed and you're in your youth ministry silo and you're in the worship silo and you're in the kids silo and you have your own teams and your own communities and we don't really do anything together. Like, man, that to me, that's a missed opportunity because you're not getting to spend that close relational community staff. I mean, I think some of my best memories, with you guys was staff retreats, like going hanging out in the cabin for 2 or 3 days and just playing games and hanging out. And, like those types of things for me are things that I will carry way beyond like some event that we did together or some service that we put together. Like those are the things that last.
Matt, I can remember stretching myself out on your living room floor and pointing my hand like this just to touch your dog and make some kind of connection with her because you guys were gone and I was supposed to be taking care of her and she wouldn't eat.
Yeah.
I can remember I spent an hour at their house laying out, slowly inching toward their dog on the floor, pretending that I didn't exist just so that dog would eat. And you know what? That was an honor. Like, honestly, I carry that around. I think I would do that again. I would 100% do that again.
Yeah.
Because you guys were my, you're who I lived my life with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just, it's why I'm here. Like,
Yeah.
it's why I drove to Virginia Beach, is because you guys are who I lived my life, you're who we're living life with.
Yeah.
Even watching our kids playing on the beach together.
So
like,
much fun.
I want my kids to be able to say that's who we lived life with.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's the recharging points. And I mean, kind of veering even back to the whole like lead pastor thing. I think that's valuable. And when lead pastors realize that's valuable, I think that's a definite win. So like recently our campus staff went out, and so this was actually a directive from the whole thing. They said, instead of doing our monthly all staff where we all come together, they gave us an allotment of money for each campus and said, like, just go spend time together, because they realized, like, you don't get through things like COVID. And for us, we did like a pastoral transition and, just ministry in general. You don't get through that stuff if you don't enjoy being around the people that you're having to like be in the trenches with. And so something as simple as like going to a local like garden area, grabbing some pizza and coffee, like, and not having any sort of like itinerary. Like you said, some of my greatest memories are, playing Settlers of Catan and like, what I mean? Like just doing things that are like, okay, is there a definite like, oh, we're doing ministry? No. But then when you are setting up a tent for an outdoor service and it's really, really hot and you're trying to figure out sound and you're doing all this other sort of stuff, you're like, but I like that guy. Like, and I know that guy. And like, know what I mean? And so it's not like a co-worker sort of thing. And that's one of the things that does make ministry unique, is because in most 9-to-5 jobs, like, their work self, but in ministry, them, their wives, their kids, where they live, you've been in their house. And so the more that a lead pastor can kind of realize, I need to intentionally build in relational time so my staff can do that. And they don't have to maybe even do that themselves. I think the more that you do it, the more they'll naturally do it. Mm-hmm. But hey, I'm going to intentionally, whether it's quarterly or every so often, no really itinerary, no anything like that, but just get my staff together and we're just going to play a board game, or we're going to just go to this coffee shop, just so they can get to know them outside of like the workspace and the task space and realize, hey, these are people with struggles and families and things. And it just makes it easier to do ministry alongside of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just talk directly to your audience for a second and say, if you're a ministry leader and that scares you, then you need to like seriously consider why. Yeah. Why does it scare you? Well, part of your life is like so private and so hidden that you're worried about sharing that with someone else. Or what hurt have you walked through that you need to take some time and let Jesus heal that hurt, because it will drain the life from your staff if you cannot commit to that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's great. Well, because one lead pastor that I had, Pastor Scott, he used to say all the time, you're either in a challenge, you're coming out of a challenge, or you're about ready to go into a challenge. And I think as staff members, there is a guarantee at some point we will have to walk through something difficult together. And if we haven't built that community and that relationship level that we can really trust and rely on each other, we won't make it through those challenges. And so I think that as a lead, keeping that in mind, like your staff is going to have to walk through difficulties, and you want to foster that community and you want to foster those relationships, even if you aren't at the center of them, but you foster that community and that relational connection. I think it's not only going to serve your church long term, but it's going to serve your staff members long term, even after they go off somewhere else, because they'll go off somewhere else and they'll know how to build that community again, which then we go beyond just our local congregation. We go to a global mindset of the kingdom of God needs strong pastors, strong staff members, strong churches to continue to share the gospel, to continue to take it out. And just like you said, we have too many pastors who are hurt, who are struggling, who just need that community. And I think that those of us who can change that, those of us who can foster those communities, love on one another, live life together, and walk through the difficulty of ministry together, and then celebrate, like you're talking about, Matt, celebrate the fun times and the down times and all those things. I think overall, the community of pastors across the board just gets stronger, which means our churches get stronger, which means the gospel goes out stronger and more people are reached. And that's ultimately what it's all about. So, man, guys, I'm so glad that you guys were able to be here. Frank, I'm so thankful you drove all the way here to hang out. Matt, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you. Man, guys, this was fun. Did you enjoy yourselves?
Yeah.
Appreciate you
absolutely.
tuning
Frank,
in.
I miss you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, next time we need to do all of us live. We just need to pick a location and hang out.
I know. Hey, Michigan is beautiful in the fall, so come on up, y'all.
Well, it has to be beautiful at some point in the year. So the fall, that's when it is?
All year. Not winter, but
Okay.
besides that, yes.
Matt, are you done filming season 3 of The Chosen yet?
I mean, I still got to work on it. I'm really pulling for that playing Jesus in the Passion play, and so that's
Nice.
fingers crossed on that one. We'll see how it goes.
You're almost there. All right. Well, thank you guys just for tuning in. Appreciate you spending time here with us here on the podcast. And have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next episode.